Hello, everyone. I'm Mariette DiCristina, and I'm the Dean of Boston University's College of Communication. I'm also an alum of COM and the parent of a recent BU grad. Welcome to today's very exciting COM Talks event, The Return of the Emancipator. Boston University's Center for Anti-Racist Research and the Boston Globe's opinion team are collaborating to resurrect and reimagine the Emancipator, the first abolitionist newspaper in the United States, founded more than 200 years ago. In today's event, the editors of the newspaper's new incarnation will explore how they intend to reframe the national conversation and hasten racial justice for our times. And this spring, the College of Communication is also searching for a faculty member who's going to specialize in impact journalism, and we really look forward to additional collaborations with the editors at the Emancipator after that as well. When you have questions, I hope you will please put them in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen rather than in the chat. And there'll be plenty of time later, I promise, to ask your questions during this event. And in fact, you can throw questions in there anytime you like. And now it's my great pleasure to introduce today's speakers and tell you a little bit about them. And then I'll pass over the mic to the moderator. First, let's give a warm welcome to Deborah Douglas, who is co-editor-in-chief of the Emancipator, and she's based here at Boston University. She has served as the Eugene S. Pulliam Distinguished Visiting Professor at DePauw University and senior leader with the Op-Ed Project, amplifying underrepresented expert voices. She has led educator trainings for higher education with the Solutions Journalism Network and taught at Northwestern University. Deborah is author of The U.S. Civil Rights Trail, A Traveler's Guide to the People, Places, and Events that Made the Movement, published by Moon in 2021. The first ever travel guide to follow the official civil rights trail in the South. Previously, Deborah worked as a number 2 in the Chicago Sun-Times' features department and deputy editorial page editor and columnist. Deborah also served as the founding managing editor of MLK 50, Justice Through Journalism, an award-winning nonprofit news outlet. Among her many awards, she received Chicago's prestigious Studs Terkel Award and the Society of American Travel Writers 2021 Guidebook of the Year. Welcome to you, Deborah. I'm so glad you're here.
Thanks so much.
Now let's say hello to Amber Payne, who is co-editor-in-chief of the Emancipator, and she's based at the Boston Globe. Amber was a 2021 Nieman Foundation Fellow at Harvard University, where she examined the cultural scaffolding needed to empower marginalized communities to propel their stories beyond the echo chamber. Amber was previously managing editor of BET.com, leading digital video strategy. Prior to that, Amber served as executive producer of Teen Vogue and Them, managing enterprise video strategy and production for both brands. In 2015, Amber founded NBC BLK, a section of NBCnews.com dedicated to elevating the conversation around Black identity, social issues, and culture. Amber spent the first decade of her career at NBC Nightly News, producing breaking news and feature stories. It's awesome to have you here, Amber.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Thank you for joining. Now let's say hello to Kimberly Atkins Stohr, who is senior opinion writer and columnist for the Boston Globe Opinion. She's also the inaugural columnist for the Emancipator and author of its newsletter, Unbound. She's also an MSNBC contributor and co-host of the Politicon podcast, #SistersInLaw. Previously, Kimberly was the first Washington, D.C.-based news correspondent for WBUR. She's also served as the Boston Herald's Washington bureau chief, guest host of C-SPAN's morning call-in shows, Washington Journal, and a Supreme Court reporter for the Massachusetts Lawyers Weekly and its sister publications. Before launching her journalism career, she was a trial and appellate litigation attorney in Boston. Kimberly is a native of Michigan and graduate of Wayne State University, Boston University School of Law, and Boston University's College of Communication, and the Columbia University Graduate School of Journalism. Welcome to you, Kimberly.
Thank you.
And now I'll welcome the moderator, after which I'll turn over the virtual mic. Michelle Johnson was part of the team that launched the Boston Globe's award-winning regional website, boston.com. Prior to moving into online media, she was an editor of the Metro, National, Foreign, and Business sections of the Globe. Michelle also served as assistant political editor, senior assistant business editor, senior assistant night editor, and for many years as a copy editor before being named the first editorial manager of Boston.com in 1995. Michelle is awarded a Knight Fellowship to study for a year at Stanford University in 1993. She's received awards for excellence from the National Association of Black Journalists and the National Lesbian and Gay Journalists Association. Columbia University, her alma mater, has recognized her with the 2020 Alumni Award as well. And after many years here as Associate Professor in Com's Journalism Department, she's just joined the ranks of our very distinguished emeritus faculty. Thank you so much, Michelle. And now I turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Dean. Really appreciate it. And I also want to thank our panelists for being here today, because as you said, we're very excited to learn about the plans for the Emancipator and to hear, what's been done so far. So let's just get right to it. I want to start off actually with a little bit of background, a little bit of history. And I'm actually going to ask Deborah to do this because she's sitting in the university side of this. And so as we know, as the Dean said, the original Emancipator, abolitionist newspaper published in the 1800s. Can you talk a little bit more about it? And frankly, how did it become the inspiration for the current day Emancipator?
So yes, so the Emancipator actually was born in Jonesboro, Tennessee, published by Elihu Embry, who came from a Quaker background, but he was actually a deist, and that particular philosophy holds that justice is a divine attribute. So it's thought that perhaps that his Quaker upbringing and his deist beliefs kind of converged. He was described as having a fiery personality, and he was really passionate. And he published several issues of the Emancipator starting in 1820 to basically just beat that drumbeat to abolish the enslavement of Black people in the United States. At some point, he became ill. The paper went away pretty quickly, and then it comes back in 1833, and it runs from 1833 to 1850. It makes an appearance in New York, again, with articles and issues and campaigns singularly focused on the idea of ending the practice of African enslavement in this country. And eventually the New York paper makes its way to Boston. At some point, the Emancipator becomes the official newspaper of the American Anti-Slavery Society. And between 1840 and 1850, it was published by the Liberty Party, and it changed its name several times as it merged with other abolitionist newspapers in Boston. Boston is central to this narrative because it was the center, the hub of abolitionism in the United States, and a hub for abolitionist news outlets. Beating that steady drumbeat, language that I took from my partner, Amber, that steady drumbeat towards abolition of slavery. And, it happened. It took 45 years.
Sure.
But it happened. And so the idea is that if we can take a singular focus on the most urgent topic of today in the context of the American project, to achieve racial equality, to achieve the American promise of an open and free society. If we beat that drumbeat towards the democracy that we deserve, if we try to, as Dr. King said, be who we say we are on paper, it'd be great to have a platform, a space that beats that steady drumbeat on a regular daily basis until we get this work done.
Oh, thank you. That's a really interesting perspective on this. And I'm sure a lot of people are wondering, why is this called the Emancipator?
Oh, I can show you a picture too.
That sheds some light. Oh, really?
Yeah, I have the first picture of the place where it was first published. My friend Margaret was doing some of her own travel writing. And this is the site of the Emancipator, published by Elihu Embry.
Wow, fantastic. Was not expecting that. Show and tell. Love the show and tell. All right. I want to turn toward your co-editor, Amber, because this is a really unusual collaboration. Here we have a university working with the local newspaper on, editorial types of content. Amber, can you explain a little bit about how this came about? How did the Anti-Racism Center and the Globe come together to create this new product?
Sure. And I'm happy to start it off. And I know that Kimberly Atkins Stohr, who is part of that process, also has that real inside knowledge. But you know, where were we all the spring and even summer of 2020? We were all, the world was shut down. People were marching for racial justice around Breonna Taylor, George Floyd. We were coming to grips with the reality of COVID and its disparate impact on communities. And through that, you know, there was a conversation held between Dr. Ibram X. Kendi and Bina Venkatraman, who was the editorial page editor. And they held that conversation on Juneteenth, and it was a needed conversation. It was so well and highly attended and engaged with that it just led to them having a conversation afterwards about, you know, what is there an intersection between journalism and anti-racism, and what would it look like to create an anti-racist newsroom? What would it look like to reimagine the way that those editorials and those visions in the original papers like the Emancipator, the Liberator, which was published in Boston by William Lloyd Garrison, the North Star, published by Frederick Douglass. You know, these papers were arguing and articulating the reasons for abolition to be immediate and not gradual. They were presenting new ideas and new voices in a way to move the conversation forward. So, you know, Bina and Ibram got to thinking, hey, it's 200 years later, but we still have, we have a great deal to achieve in building a racially just society. And how do we help people imagine what's possible and help them imagine this other society, pointing out not just the problems of systemic racism, but reframing the narrative and giving solutions. And so this idea came from that moment, that conversation, to think about, what if you had you took data and scholarship and evidence to reframe that narrative.
Mm-hmm. And Kimberly, as Amber mentioned, you were there. What was the conversation like? A little bit more. Can you go into a little bit more detail about what was discussed as you were sort of figuring out the pilot for this?
Yeah, well, I came home right after. That was sort of that conversation between Dr. Kendi and Bina Venkatraman was the seed for this idea. And soon after, Bina hired me on to sort of help build this thing and with this idea in mind for the Emancipator. And what was really grounding about it, and one thing that made me want to come and join the Globe and be a part of this project in particular, was the fact that these abolitionist newspapers, when you read them, they're not about, you think about an abolitionist newspaper, a paper that's proposing and advocating for the abolition of slavery as an institution in America. It's almost as if that was the given first point, and the editorials and the commentary that was contained in these looked beyond the emancipation of enslaved people and looked to, how do we get to a place where Black people in America can achieve full citizenry? How do they engage in business? How do they get an equal education? How do they become elected officials? It was as if the abolition of slavery itself was just the starting point. And looking at the issues that we face today, including the awakening that we had as a nation in 2020 with respect to criminal justice, but far beyond in so many other systems, I like the idea of having the lodestar be, how do we reach equal citizenry? How do we reach that point where the barriers that exist, particularly for Black Americans, are removed so that they can fully be equal participating citizens in society? And so that's the real, that's the legacy that we're building on in addressing today's problems.
Mm-hmm. That's, yeah, and I get where you guys are headed with this, But as you know, as a journalist and somebody who's thinking about, okay, well, how would I put this together? I'm still thinking, well, how does this collaboration work? You know, I mean, you guys are in two different universes. You're on the academic side, you're on the newsroom side. How do you guys envision being able to collaborate? I mean, are there advantages to teaming up that you can see so far?
Yeah, I mean, to start off, being on the Globe side of the partnership, of course, we're tapping into the powerful institution that is the Boston Globe, and being housed in that media organization. Just logistically, we're a startup, and
Sure.
it's the little things like legal and HR and finance and marketing and sales and advertising. You know, we're working just logistically, we're working with all these teams to build out a strategy and a plan that has longevity for, you know, a startup newsroom. And we also have the opportunity to collaborate with the incredible journalists that are on the Boston Globe side or at Stat News, who they're doing a lot of great journalism on health equity. So, you know, I think that's one space where we team up. And with Deborah seated at the Center for Antiracist Research, I'll let her share more, but we've had some amazing conversations with those academics and researchers that will certainly marry together with the journalism.
Sure.
Yeah, so in terms of being at the center, we have access to scholars that are positioned inside the center and affiliated with the center. I was just talking to a researcher yesterday about a really great story idea about children's book illustrations that we want to build into something. We have the Anti-Racist Tech Initiative. You know, the center is doing a deep dive on all things health disparities. There's just so much rich research going on there, and an opportunity for us to be the first to access their findings and to highlight the solutions that they are testing and putting into place with the institutions and individuals that they are partnering with. And like Amber said, we are also just leveraging the resources on the institutional resources on that side. So I talk to legal every week and fundraising every week, and I was getting subscriptions signed up to, this morning. And but me at the center of it all, I feel like when you ask the question, how does this work, or how can this work? I'm looking at Amber, I'm looking at Kimberly and myself. We're all seasoned journalists, and that's how it's working. We're bringing the best of journalistic practice, and we've critiqued legacy journalism and journalism orthodoxy, and we're taking out what we don't think works, and we are testing out what we do think works, and we're bringing all of those great ideas and practices into the development of this publication.
Sure. And speaking of what works and what doesn't work, I just retired from teaching multi-platform journalism, multimedia journalism. So one of my questions when I'm thinking about when this is fully rolled out, is the Emancipator going to be a multi-platform publication? Newspaper, online, social media, podcasting, whatever. I mean, what is it going to look like?
It already is.
Okay.
It already is. I mean,
yes, I know. I was going to ask you about the newsletter in a minute too, and the website, but
yes.
Is that how you're envisioning, like, just doing multi-platform?
Well, I think that that's the only way you can do really impactful journalism
in this day and age. Yeah.
In this day, right. So we have to, and even before our official full launch, we have a presence on social media. As you said, I've been writing a newsletter for a while now, highlighting the types of content that we will be including when the site launches fully. There is a landing page already in existence, and that will continue to change and grow. There will be video there. We've already had events and we'll continue to do that. I think engaging people where they are is hugely important because
Sure.
generational, and of course it also will appear in print in the Boston Globe, the editorial pages. So you have to engage people where they are. Some people read the paper at their breakfast tables. Some people engage in media via TikTok or Instagram. And so we have to make sure we are in the spaces to engage people where they get their news and where they get their information. And one of the really cool things about this is that we've already started doing that in large measure, and that will only continue to grow and sustain as we grow and sustain.
Absolutely. And, if you're looking at all these different platforms and you're thinking about building this out, you must be thinking about, well, what types of contributors would we like to have working with us? I know you probably can't name names at this point, or I don't even know if you have positions open yet, but are you thinking about, okay, well, here are the types of people that we would like to have on this team?
Besides Kim?
Besides Kim, yes. In addition to Kimberly, yes.
Yes, in addition to Kim. Because this is commentary forward, deeply evidence-based analysis, we want to leverage the expertise of a range of scholars around the country and really around the world. And this will be a really great opportunity to center underrepresented expert voices in the public conversation also, primarily. Secondarily, people, there are subject matter experts, there are community members who are experts on their own lived experience. And so we want to hear from the people. And included in that group are students. And we want to hear from them in all the variety of ways that we can hear from them.
Sure. Kimberly, you've mentioned your newsletter a couple of times. Can you update people on, what kind of issues you've tackled so far, and maybe talk a little about what you'd like to do going forward with the newsletter?
Absolutely. So the newsletter is called Unbound. It was from an issue of The Liberator, actually words from William Lloyd Harrison that we thought would be a perfect framing for this newsletter. And what it's designed to do is to take the content from the Emancipator, whether it is annotated abolitionist editorials that have appeared in the past where people, scholars and community members and others talk about the ways that the principles in them still apply today, whether it is research, whether it is commentary, and bring that into context based on what is happening in our world today. And so far, we have talked about everything from the origins of Juneteenth and Thanksgiving to how in the ongoing abortion debate, how it can be centered in terms of Black women and how Black women are leading the call for reproductive justice, not just reproductive access, not just reproductive choice, but reproductive justice, which is something that is very specific and that has been led by Black women. Just really centering how all of these issues affect the discussions of things that are happening right now. I sometimes get frustrated because I feel like when we talk about justice and equality, particularly when it comes to anti-racist initiatives or anti-Black or anti-Black things that are happening that are anti-Black, the focus often falls on criminal justice reform, which is incredibly important, but just one tiny aspect of what of the systemic racism that we face as a society, which is why one of the first things that I've been working very hard now on is financial systems, systemic racism in financial systems. When you think about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, what do you need to get that promise that exists in the Declaration of Independence? Well, you need money. And at every single system that Americans must access in order to achieve that kind of success, there is systemic racism built into it. whether it's lending, whether it's housing, whether it's credit reporting, whether it's investing, whether it's retirement. And so these are the things that we need to look for solutions about. And it's just as, if not more, immediately important to Americans' lives as criminal justice reform. And so those are the types of things we're talking about. Deb mentioned health disparities, which is a huge issue that affects the Black community. Environmental justice, a huge issue that affects the Black community. And so we're contextualizing all these things in a way that makes people, regardless of who you are, it's not just for Black people, but people often don't understand when we talk about injustice. People think, well, no, if you work really hard and you do what you're supposed to, you have access to the American dream just like everyone else. No, it's baked into the cake in so many ways that I think a lot of people don't even realize. And so we approach it from that way to enlighten people and to come with solutions in hand to show that there is a way to do things differently.
Yeah, you guys are coming at this from quite a few angles. I'm going to put on my Professor Johnson cap for a minute and ask you a question I was always asking my students. Who is your audience for this? Do you guys see this as, sort of Boston, New England? Is it national? Is it international? All the above? I mean, because that does factor into how you produce something, know who your audience is. Yeah. So who are you trying to address here?
Yeah. Who are you talking to?
Yeah, who are you talking to?
Yeah.
Amber, you want to take that?
Sure, I can start. I mean, Boston is a microcosm for these national stories that Kim was mentioning, these topics, everything she ticked off. That is a concern in Boston, and it is a concern nationwide, I would say even worldwide. So we will have a national and even international audience, because I think about something like prison reform and how there's so much to learn from international prisons and how they're handling things. So, we've been saying that we're creating a community for anyone who wants to be part of the solution. So yes, there were a lot of people who were engaged and hyper aware, and they, read all the books after George Floyd and reached out to friends and wanted to have that conversation in a safe way, in a safe space. And, we want to capture that audience who they want to envision and they want to build a more equitable society. They want to be part of the solution. So there's no real age or limit or racial barrier to that. But I would say, that's the focus. There may be some people who don't want to have that conversation and they don't want to be a part of it. And they will not be our audience. We're going to focus on serving and educating this audience. I know that I learn something every day. I learn something new every day. And I want to make sure that the Emancipator is accessible for this kind of audience, where you need to meet people where we are. We're talking about formats. We're talking about how one person may want to watch a video commentary from Dr. Ibram Kendi. Well, one person may want to actually look at a comic. We published our first comic strip from Joel Christian Gill called Everything's Racist, the hidden history behind things you just didn't know had racism embedded in them. That's a visual snapshot. We also will have deep, 1,500 word think pieces. And so we hope that is one way that we're going to broaden our audience, by having different kinds of content and meeting them there where they are.
Yeah.
Well, that's a good segue. Well, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Deborah. No,
I was going to say to Kimberly's point about the early abolitionist newspapers having the default that this is happening. So what's next? We'll be prioritizing humanity in our coverage. So this is not one of those both sides type platforms where we have to stop what we're doing and go back to the beginning of the conversation to convince people of where we need to go. The assumption is that democracy matters, the American project matters, and racial inequality is a barrier to getting there to the highest possible metaphorical potential of what that means. And we're going to start from there.
Yeah, and I think you've already answered my question, because I was about to ask Amber, okay, generally, there's been a wall between opinion on this side and news on the other side. And I was wondering like where the Emancipator fell. Was it on either side of the wall or somewhere in between? And it sounds like, and am I correct in saying it's going to be somewhere in between?
Well, we're viewing the Emancipator as a digital magazine. And so, as you know, magazines service their audiences from a point of view.
Yes.
And so I would think less about opinion and more about deeply evidence-based analysis of the facts that requires research and reporting.
Mm-hmm.
So much research and reporting.
Yes, I assume you guys have a lot of work ahead. So I guess I was wondering whether there would be any sort of, disagreement or conflict between the news side and the opinion side, but it sounds like because the way you guys are approaching this, that's not likely to happen.
I mean, I think we're bringing, we're looking at the news of the day or the news of the week or the news of the era that we're living in. And we're not the day one story. We're the maybe day 3, 4 story. Or maybe there's a project that there's something that happens and we say, let's take 3 months or 6 months or 1 year to really build this out in a big way. So, we're not a breaking news outlet, but we are going to be giving history or context to that news so that you will be able to come away with something. You will be able to come away feeling knowledge, feeling smarter, feeling like you have an understanding, like maybe you're able to articulate that a new perspective, or have an opinion, have a way forward. I mean, that's, I think opinion, Deborah and I were talking about this because we talked to a lot of our straight news, hard news, friends and mentors and people in our lives about what we're building. And I know that there sometimes is a perception about opinion journalism, just that it's just somebody's opinion and there's no fact or evidence here. And it's a rant.
Yeah. No. Yeah.
And we're dispelling that. And I know that the Globe opinion team, they already dispel that myth with the work, the amazing work that they do. And so I feel like, even looking at how the opinion team works, there've been some incredible projects out of individual columnists and out of the ideas team. They just did a project editing the Constitution, which Kimberly was a part of. They asked legal experts and journalists about changes they'd make to the Constitution if they could, a very deep, thorough project. And, those are the kinds of things when I look at the work the opinion team's doing, I look at hopefully the Emancipator being a complement to that kind of work. Renee Graham, who you should always read Renee Graham, opinion columns. She has a piece out on Ron DeSantis, the Florida governor who wants to outlaw white guilt and discomfort. And, she has a line, and it's a tight piece. And she had a line in there that about, it's no coincidence that parents' rights echo the 19th century cries for states' rights to protect slavery. Racism is America's original remix. Just that line kind of jumped out to me as, okay, I could see an Emancipator piece, complementing this and really, taking that and breaking that out. I wouldn't change a word in her piece, but that kind of triggered to me the way that, there are pieces that opinion's doing, we're not going to be replicating or stepping on, but we might be, building upon in our way.
Yeah, and everything that Amber and Deb just said, I will only add that having come when I joined the Globe for the first time in my 2-decade journalism career, from the news side to the opinion side, I myself had a lot of preconceived notions about how opinion writing worked. And it seemed like a big jump for me that I had to think long and hard about. And one of the first things that I learned that was really heartening and made me feel great about being a part of Globe Opinion is how deeply reported all the opinion pieces are. We don't rely on the news side. We do our own reporting. We do our own research and backup, and every piece that you see in Globe Opinion is backed up by the same sort of journalistic standards that you have on the news side. where we question everything, including the reporting of the news side, right? So that is exactly the fervor and the energy that we bring to these projects, that opinion journalism is still journalism. It is still strong, it is still evidence-based, it is still fact-based, but it has a point of view. That's the difference there. It's not just somebody sitting up in a glass, glass office, spouting off their opinions.
You mean you don't have a throne, Kimberly?
I do. I'm waiting for my throne to be delivered. It never came.
Yeah. I would just add that in the ecosystem, in the news media ecosystem, the commentary is among the most shared pieces of content at any news outlet today. So there is a hunger for a point of view. No longer in news media do people come to their magazines or daily papers or TV shows and expect to be fed like baby birds, fed information that they swallow and act on. They want you to be clear about where you stand so they can figure out where they stand and evaluate the information in the middle.
And let me ask you guys how you feel about, there's been a lot of talk about something called solutions journalism. Do you think, especially on Deborah's side, do you think you guys will be producing stuff that sort of falls into that category?
Absolutely. Everything that we're talking about, we want to infuse the solutions journalism approach and quality of inquiry in everything that we do. And Kimberly actually alluded to that earlier when she talked about the early abolitionist newspapers unpacking how we are going to do this. How are we going to be fully integrated and implicated in the American project? And so with every piece that we have, the solutions journalism approach is actually, it is a particular framework developed by the Solutions Journalism Network, founded by Tina Rosenberg and David Bornstein at the New York Times. It looks for practices and policies and ideas and how communities are applying them to social problems and issues of the day. And it looks for insights and analysis, and it has a level of rigor to it so that we can actually see what worked, what can work, what didn't work, and what we need to figure out, how to start over and regroup. But the idea is that communities are purposing themselves to be agents of their own salvation. And traditional media hasn't done a really great job of telling that story. And when you center all the voices, especially the voices of working people and workaday families in that conversation, and you go and you show where people are seeking solutions and applying solutions and developing an analysis and a critique about that, then you have an opportunity to really happen upon what really works.
And I imagine for you being embedded at a university, you're going to have access to resources to sort of produce that sort of thing. So it must be interesting for you, to think about this and to look around BU and say, what's here that I can tap, to get this story, to put this story together. So
inside BU and outside of BU also.
Yes. Boston, it's an amazing city, right? Let me turn to the next topic because, well, to put it mildly, we know the country has been divided as of late.
You think?
Breaking news.
And I actually have a question about, I know you guys have content out there already, you're publishing. What have you seen? What's the response been to what you've done so far? Critics, supporters, is there pushback coming from either side? Because pushback can come from either side. What have you been seeing and hearing in response to where you are so far?
I'll start. I as the author of some of the pieces that we have published already, yes, there have been some. There have been some that just want to viscerally push back against any narrative that they have already deemed or categorized in some sort of way, even without looking at it. I think so far the biggest pushback that I've seen is to, surprisingly, was our Thanksgiving content, which just underscored the fact that something that I sort of took for granted is that the tale that Americans have told themselves about Thanksgiving for so many generations just fundamentally isn't true. And we just sort of looked at what is true about it. but also made a point to center in the joy of that holiday and what it means for all Americans, including Black Americans, including Indigenous Americans, including everyone. And how, despite that, I got a lot of pushback saying, oh, we're just trying to spoil Thanksgiving. We're trying to take everything. It was like, did you read it? Like, I literally included my sweet potato pie recipe in my coverage. Like, it's certainly about the joy. Not the full recipe, but I talked about food.
Okay.
And so, yes, there are going to be some people who are intent on pegging this and dismissing this because that is a place where we are in the world. But what I'm hoping is to approach this, my goal is approaching this in a way that isn't about division. It isn't even about politics. It's about what's right. I mean, I think the idea of the American dream is a perfect place. I honestly do believe that for a lot of people who understandably believe that if you work hard, you go to school, you do what you're supposed to do, you pay your taxes, and you are a contributing member of society, you will succeed. That is how it's supposed to work. And I think people don't realize that the system is not set up for that to happen in the same way for everyone. And I think if people think about that in terms of their own experiences, seeing how their parents worked hard, how they've worked hard, all the things that they've done to try to provide for themselves and their families, and they see, oh, wow, for a lot of people, there are these barriers put in place that they didn't ask for. Well, that doesn't seem right. Well, there should be solutions to that. And I hope that we can approach it from that way. Maybe I'm being optimistic, but that's how I, in my work, am presenting this. The same way with the Thanksgiving story. It's not casting dispersions on anyone. It's like, okay, well, this is what happened, and this is how we've grown as a nation. And despite the fact that the story is actually nothing like what we tell ourselves, it's actually quite brutal, we've still managed to embrace the idea of families coming together, embrace the idea of breaking bread together, and turn this into something that brings us joy despite its very difficult beginnings. And that's what I hope to do. I hope people accept it that way. I know a lot of people won't, but we can only do what we can do.
Okay,
go ahead. I can tell you that I've been monitoring social media, especially the comments that we got after we published 2 beautifully produced videos by Amber leading into the January 6th anniversary. There's a hunger for this approach that I found on multiple platforms. People feel relieved and refreshed. But, to Kimberly's point, there is a contingent of people who are on the hunt in a sort of like a whack-a-mole fashion, ready to pounce and to drown out any level of context or logic. And so what? That we want to serve the people who want this information, who want us to be the best we can be.
Great. Well, listen, I think I want to pause here and dive into some of the Q&A because we got questions coming in fast and furious. And I'm actually, I'm going to put somebody that I know at the front of the line because she's a comm grad and an editor at the Wall Street Journal. Her name is also Kimberly and her last name is Johnson, which, also puts her in front of the list for me. One of the things that Kimberly's asking is, how are you guys going to measure success? From a newsroom perspective, revenue, research. Well, how do you see success?
Yeah, I can start with that. That's definitely a complex question and answer. And, we're a collaboration. So we're not a nonprofit newsroom. We're a collaboration between the Globe and BU. So we're not technically for profit, but of course we're fundraising. We need to prove that this kind of model for journalism is possible. So there is one aspect of it that there have been a lot of people. There have been a lot of newsrooms that have been growing that are focusing on marginalized communities. And we're all, seeking this kind of fundraising. So that will certainly show that this can be a success when we set our model together for that kind of sustainability for this organization. But I mean, we're talking about how to measure impact, and yeah, impact can be 1 million views, or impact can be an event that we hold that is a smaller event, but it is very meaningful. It's a touch point for people. It may lead to new ideas, new stories. It may lead to members being in community with one another, sharing ideas and having something take off from there. So, that's a really good question that we're still considering, but I'd say it's not going to be in the traditional, we're not looking at those traditional sense of it's really all metrics.
Right.
We're looking at ways to have impact and see change. We're not here to change laws or policies, but we're here to host those conversations and be a platform for those ideas. And we will be a success if we can do that, and we can be a platform for these new ideas.
Sure. Okay. We have a question from David. David wants to know, will the Emancipator Platform include issues outside Greater Boston and include Western Massachusetts, Cape Cod, in particular Cape Cod, where tribal communities are suffering from, social issues and environmental justice challenges?
Well, we will be a national publication, so we will speak to those regional issues in the context of convening a national conversation.
Okay.
Yeah, and our content has already gone beyond, it is not, in the fact that this is in the vein of abolitionist newspapers, it does focus a great deal on Black Americans because of the particularity with which the institution of enslaving humans has affected the entire country. Like, slavery affects everyone, not just Black people, not just white people. It affects all Americans. And so that's an important thing to focus upon. But as I said, we've already talked about and explored other communities. Some of my newsletter content has focused on the LGBTQ community. Certainly my Thanksgiving newsletter focused on Indigenous communities, including the very original Thanksgiving story, which took place in Massachusetts. So certainly that is a part of it too. I think we can do both at the same time.
Yeah, we like to say that you can't talk about stolen people without talking about stolen land.
All right, let's check out another question. This person only listed initials, but they're saying it's an exciting new venture, and considering that the history you're building upon, they're curious whether you expect to cover issues related to modern day slavery and human trafficking, just in general, or from a perspective of the Black community. Is that a possibility? Would you look at modern day slavery?
Sure. I mean, chattel slavery is over, but I think, we've talked to a number of activists in the prison, the criminal legal system space, and in people who are incarcerated, who have we've spoken with, who want to be involved with us, whether it's editing or being part of telling that story. And so the short answer is yes. We're looking to connect with those activists, those individuals who have that story and perspective. And, I think those all fit into where we're looking to tell these stories.
And I don't think, listen, there are certainly not any limit or outer barriers that we are erecting in terms of what we are going to look at. Just like the abolitionist newspapers that existed in the 19th century, many of them carried on long after the Emancipation Proclamation. They continued to grow and change and address the issues that needed to be addressed. And I think we will be the same. We are grounded in that tradition. And so the impact of enslavement in America is sort of a through line. But as I said, that affects everybody, that impacts everyone. As Deborah said, you can't, the uniformity, the idea that stealing humans, stealing land, that is something that resonates in so many different ways. So I don't want people to walk away thinking, oh, this is just a Black project, or this is just about the vestiges of slavery. It's about so much more than that. It's about justice. It's about equality. It's about anti-racism, and that extends so far beyond just one group of people.
Yeah, the Black experience just is a point of entry to a larger justice conversation. And anti-Blackness is just so foundational to this American project that, you know, it's like it's a strong stool that you can stand on to talk about anything else you want to talk about. And very often our default is the white default, really the white male default. And so we're moving that, we're shifting that perspective and engaging in this point of entry through the Black experience as a way of hosting a conversation about the experience for all of us. And we want everyone to be implicated in the solutions that we're amplifying. And I've gotten a sense in some of the conversations that we've had, when they see a Black team, that just makes us default a Black publication. Whereas when you see white editors, you think, oh, they can just do journalism on anything.
Yes.
Oh, we're journalists, grounded in orthodoxy, ready to do what works.
Yes, I mean, there are quite a few questions in here asking, you know, if this is going to be coming from specifically a Black perspective or Black and white issues. So I can see that that's top of mind.
It's a uniquely American experience. It's the Black American, but it's an American experience, but a particular American experience.
And it's a multiracial American experience too. And as a biracial person with a multiracial daughter, I think about the conversations she's going to have. I think about, you know, the stories of the anti-Asian hate and just the stories of the Asian American struggle for justice, for rights, the incarceration, the persecution, the dehumanization of Asian Americans. That is definitely a topic that we would cover, because, and there's also an intersection between, you know, the Asian American and Black struggle and fight for justice, even though, you know, there's always a wedge that's tried to put between these communities. So that's something that needs history and context around it. And that's certainly a community that we would be telling these stories about, you know, it's really about these racist policies and institutions that have been created, these communities of color who've been marginalized. And that's not a singular experience.
Sure. And if you look at, yes, the three of us at this point are the face of this project, but if you go on the website and look at our board of advisors, it's a much broader group of people who bring their scholarship, their lived experiences, and their work to the ideas that are fueling this. So it is not just a Black women's project. And I think Deb got it just right. Most things are framed, not just from a white male perspective, but a white cisgender heterosexual male perspective. And we're looking at it in a very different way.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because, again, as I'm looking at the questions here, they're still kind of focusing on, you know, the Black-white issue. And there are a couple of questions about whether you guys are going to have a relationship with the Bay State Banner, you know, which is the oldest Black publication here, or Boston Review. How are you working with other partners, or are you working with other partners, other media partners in the area?
Well, currently we're building out just the operational infrastructure of the Emancipator. When people think, oh, they hired 2 new editors, and they think that we're working on copy all day, and it's so much different and bigger than that. And so we're building the business first, and then we, you know, built out our content pillars and verticals. And we've talked to some newsrooms, and we're on a perpetual listening tour to discuss and evaluate potential partnerships. So those discussions are not off the table. We are just building this plane as we're flying it too. And we hope that we can partner with publications or media outlets in the area.
And I also just want to say, I think one thing that questions like that are born out of is this idea that we are a Black news publication, or that we are trying to transplant or compete with the Bay State Banner or other historic and very necessary news organizations. We are not. We are fundamentally very different from that. I mean, think about a lot of the abolitionist news publications from the 19th century were not created or started by Black people. They were started and created by people like William Lloyd Garrison. It was meant to tap the voices of women who had not been a part of the conversation at that time. The conversation from a broad spectrum of thought leaders of that time to come together to really create the best possible way to make this case that not only is slavery something that cannot be sustained in society, but what a society would look like, a post-slavery society would look like. So those publications are so important, so crucial. What we are doing isn't getting in their way. What they're doing isn't competing. And certainly there are opportunities for partnership, but it's not the exact same thing. I think people are trying to figure out what this is. Is it a black publication? Is it this? Is it that? No, we want to reach all stakeholders, because it's not just Black people who can solve the problem of systemic racism in America. Everyone has a part to play, and we're trying to bring these solutions to the fore so that everyone can recognize their part to play.
Well said.
Sure. Well, here's a practical question. Speaking of reaching everybody, Rita wants to know whether you have to subscribe to the Globe to get access to the Emancipator and the newsletter.
Nope. It's free like our people.
Right answer.
I think
I'm sure everybody's excited to hear that.
And follow, you can, I think Mariette is dropping links.
Yes.
You can follow us on all the socials. We did start a YouTube channel. We're on all the other socials. Deborah's going to be our senior TikTok consultant until we get on TikTok.
That's where the students can help you.
Yes.
Wow. Somebody's asking, what are ways that everyday folks can get involved to, help elevate this amazing work that's being done? Are you guys looking for pitches? Are you looking for partners? What are you looking for?
The first thing you can do is, if you're on Facebook, join our closed Facebook page. We're trying to have a quality conversation there. So that's why the page is closed. Follow us on Instagram and Twitter, and just share our content as much as you can. That's the least you can do. And ask questions and convene a conversation with your own communities of interest to kind of get the conversation going. We are seeking partners in a variety of ways for events, fundraising. we can't say that enough. Amber, do you want to add some other?
I was dropping these links over to Mariette.
Oh, great.
So what else do we have?
Partnerships, social media. Oh, and Amber already dropped the pitches link. So we are accepting pitches.
Okay.
And if you have some ideas.
And we're hiring, we're also hiring. I think the link she put in there says to connect. We're looking for a creative director, a senior editor, a columnist, a social media director, and a project manager. Just to begin with, we're building, this is a startup, guys. We're building this, we're raising money, and we will continue to grow and build our team. And that's where we are, and that's how you can help now. In our newsletter, last summer, we did a great survey with the newsletter audience, who's primarily a Northeastern, kind of Globe audience. And we did ask them, what are you reading? What do you like to see? What do you want more of, less of? So we really, I know people joke, don't read the comments. We're reading the comments because we do want to know how we can best address and serve. If there's a question, if there's an idea, that, we're looking at all of it and doing our best to get back to people also.
Well, we're about out of time, and I hesitate to even drop this question on you, but people are asking, like, when does this launch? When will everything be up? Do you have a ballpark date, or it's just sort of a rolling thing and it'll just continue throughout the year? What? What's
Well,
going on?
So, right now you can sign up for Kim's newsletter and you'll be getting updates. And we are aiming for a Q2 launch. So
Great.
stay
Good to
tuned
know.
for that. On our landing page, you'll get to kind of follow and see what some of the work we're doing, but that's not our website. That's not our official launch. So stay tuned.
And
All
really
right.
go to our YouTube page and look at the videos. They're
Yes.
powerful and awesome.
All right. Well, guys,
Yeah.
we are completely out of time. I cannot thank you enough. This was a fascinating discussion. I know people are looking forward to seeing the work that you're doing and, have already been impressed by what you've done so far. So thank you. Thank you so much for being here today. And perhaps we can do this again sometime when you guys are available. So good luck with everything. And to our audience, thank you for being here. Appreciate you guys being part of this, and take a look at an upcoming event that we have here. If you're interested, be sure to join us for this session on podcasting, because as we know, that's a thing right now. All right, guys, thank you so much. We're going to log off now. We'll see you
Thank
next
you.
time.
Thank
Thanks
you.
so much.